Did you get any happier when you got rich? What do you think a healthy view of money is? So I'll take this as an opportunity to give a shameless plug to a friend of mine, actually, Ramit Sethi, and Sethi, and his podcast, which I think is just "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." It may have a different name, but if you just find Ramit Sethi and his podcast, each episode, and I've listened to a ton of them, he has generally a couple on, and they talk about their money issues, their money priorities, what it means to live a rich life. And what you realize very quickly is that people have neuroses or stories, at the very least, around money that both help and hurt them no matter how much money they have. So he can talk to a couple where they barely have enough money to scrape by and they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, or he can talk to a couple that's worth $10 million and is still comparing and shopping for strawberries. And at the very least, it normalizes some of the unanswered questions and maybe unrealistic expectations that people have around money. To answer your question directly, I would say that it's hard for me, first of all, to point to a line after which I felt rich, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And that if for the time being, and I'm borrowing this from someone else, I think it was a podcast guest, but the value or cost of something being the amount of life energy you exchange for it. So you give to it or get from it, right? In the sort of pro and con, positive and negative sides of things. And what I've noticed for a lot of my friends is that past a certain point, wealth actually turns into a energy consuming facet of their lives. And this is not to complain, because certainly I feel, and I am extremely fortunate for a million reasons. But I have observed people who, while they are on the hunt, while they are on the journey to become rich, and I'm putting that in quotation marks in my mind because I think the goalposts tend to move for people, and it is and can be a very nebulous goal. But implicit in that is very often the assumption that once I have this money, once I am rich, once I have won that game, most of my problems or many of my problems will be solved. And on Maslow's hierarchy, if we're talking about shelter, food, right? So rent or mortgage, et cetera, that type of thing, it can be true. But the psychological, psycho-emotional issues tend to not just not get fixed, but sometimes get exaggerated. So by that, I mean power, alcohol, money tend to magnify whatever is there. It's also true with psychedelics for a lot of people. And if you have, say, paranoia, or you're worried about people ripping you off, fill in the blank. It could be any number of things. If you feel insecure in ways A, B, and C, all of those levers I just mentioned, including money, tend to amplify those things. If someone's generous, they're going to be super generous. If someone's a stingy asshole, they're going to be a super stingy asshole, and so on and so forth. And what I've found is that people can be very happy and often are very upbeat when they can hold in their mind the belief that once they cross the finish line, these problems will be fixed. Once they have the money, more often than not, they realize that's not the case, and it can actually result in different types of, and maybe more intractable types of depression or malaise, because then it's like, well, wait a second, for 20 years, 30 years, I've assumed this would solve the problem. It didn't. Now what? And on top of that, I would say once you have team, once you have more stuff, let's say somebody buys a second house, et cetera, all of that consumes life energy on some level. And you can create systems and so on, but it does create a bandwidth drain. And for instance, if you have a bunch of money, people are going to ask you for that money constantly in some form or another. And you will feel compelled, most people will, to think about investing a lot. And generating that initial wealth and being really good at investing are two entirely different sports. So you may be very well suited to the former and very ill suited to the latter. So again, coming back to your direct question, did I get any happier when I got rich? I would say that having a certain degree of relief, especially when thinking about caring for aging parents, when thinking about being able to help family members, being able to help family members and close friends during something like COVID, for instance, especially in the beginning when there was a lot of uncertainty, and having some capital made a difference in terms of having optionality and moving people around and so on. All of those things, I would say, give me a greater peace of mind and a certain degree of stillness. But on the other side of the ledger, there's a lot of shit that eats energy. What do I think a healthy view of money is? I would suggest that you actually listen to my podcast episode with Morgan Housel, Housel, on the psychology of money. This was a hugely popular episode, and I thought it would be reasonably popular, but it ended up getting a lot of spread via word of mouth and becoming mega popular. So I'd suggest listening to that. Now, I would also say I don't have all the answers because I fit in the category of someone who thought money would fix tons and tons and tons of things and be able to exhale and go maybe lay on a beach and rub cocoa butter on my belly and read novels and be perfectly content to do that for months and months of the year. Turns out not to be the case. Also, if you're accustomed to driving in sixth gear on the Autobahn and you've done that for 20, 30 years, getting used to like driving through a school district and stopping at red lights and so on at 20 miles an hour is not automatically easy to do. You think it would be, but if you're used to park or mostly sixth gear, getting used to the gears in between, at least for me personally, has been very challenging. So I'm still working on it. And I think this is a fascinating question. So I may not have given much clarity, but that is my current state of play with these questions.